Okay. The next one is the high-speed stall. The aim is just to remind students that abrupt elevator movements will load the airframe and could possibly stall the aircraft. The flight exercise is quite complicated because in order to set the glider up in nose down attitude at low speed, we're required to actually put it into a nose drop stall. There's no other way of getting it in a nose low attitude at low speed. So you need to brief the student that even though you're going to stall it once, that's not the stall that they should be interested in. It is merely the pull out of the dive and the speed at which they can feel buffet as they pull out of the dive. So in flight, because we're looking at an increase in stalling speed, we need to stall the glider in a 1G situation, exactly the same as you would a mush stall. So bring the speed back at about 1 knot per second and ask the student to tell you at what speed they can feel the buffet. Always fly these exercises using the student's ASI if you can see it, because there's almost always a difference between the two. And let's say we're doing this in a K13. You might find the 1G stall happens at 34 knots, something like that, and then recover from it. The second bit of the exercise is we set up this sharp nose drop stall. Once the nose has pitched down, bring the stick smartly onto the backstop and get the student to read out the speed that they can feel buffeting on the airframe. Again, in the K13, that happens normally at about 50 knots, 48, 50 knots. So they should be able to see that the stalling speed is significantly higher pulling G than in a 1G stall. Post-flight debrief, just emphasise to the student that if they ever find themselves in a situation where they are pointing nose down, they need to be smooth about applying backstick to recover from the dive. Situations could be recovering from a stall or a failed spin attempt, launch failures, or indeed there have been a number of gliders that have mush stalled into the ground where people have left the round out too late and brought the stick back sharply from 10 foot and they've mush stalled into the ground. Just be careful about excessive speed. If you're doing this exercise and the speed's gone beyond about 55 or 60 knots, it's probably worthwhile abandoning the exercise and starting again from the beginning. Okay, what we're going to do now is have a look at an accelerated stall, and I'm going to accelerate the glider by pulling out of a dive. And we want to have a look at the speed that we get the buffet as I pull out of the dive. However, before we do that, I'm just going to do a normal 1G unaccelerated stall and we'll see what speed we get buffet at. So I'm just bringing the stick back, slowing it down, 40 knots. And I think we're starting to get buffet here at about 32, 33 knots. You can see the vibration and we get a wing drop. So we're getting pre-stall buffet there at 32, 33 knots. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is demonstrate that we can get pre-stall buffet at a higher speed by pulling out of a dive. Now to set this exercise up, I'm going to have to do another stall simply to put the glider in a nose down attitude at a low speed. Don't worry about that. But as I'm pulling out of the dive, look at your ASI and tell me at what speed we get buffet. Okay, so I'm just going to set the exercise up now. So I'm just bringing the nose up so we get a nice sharp nose drop stall. Here we go. But as I pull out of the dive now, tell me what speed we got buffet. Feel the buffet there at about 48 knots, so I was pulling out of the dive. So we had an increase from 32 all the way up to 38 knots pulling out of the dive. So what you want to take away from that demonstration is if you find yourself in a nose low attitude, so for instance off a failed winch launch or coming out of the dive from a spin, make sure you recover smoothly and progressively. Don't apply sharp elevator inputs pulling out of the dive.